All right, grade 10s, we're going to finish section 4.6, applying the exponent laws. And these ones are going to get a little bit trickier. So make sure you've done all the other work leading up to this before you start tackling these ones. So here the first one we're going to look at is a. It has 8a cubed b to the power 6, and that's all to the exponent of 1/3. So that 1/3 needs to get applied to each of those values inside the brackets, including the 8. So it's going to become 8 to the power of 1/3, a to the power of 3 times 1/3, so 3 times 1/3, and b to the power of 6 times 1/3. So now we're going to actually need to multiply these. Remember that when you have a number to the power of 1/3, the 3 is the index. So this is the fractional exponent where 3 becomes the index and 8 is underneath. When we multiply by 3 times 1/3, we really get 3 over 3, which is 1. And when we multiply 6 times 1/3, we get 6 over 3, which is 2. Then all we need to do is figure out that cube root of 8, and the cube root of 8 is 2. So my final answer here will be 2ab squared. Notice now though that the squared is only on the b, not the a or the 2, because there's no brackets. Let's try another one. Here we have x to the power of 3 over 2 y squared multiplied by x to the power of 1/2 y to the negative 1. So here I can combine my x's, and right now they're being multiplied together, which means I add the exponents. So 3 over 2 plus 1 over 2. And I can combine my y's, which also means I add the exponent. So 2 plus a negative 1. So when I add the x exponents, 3 over 2 plus 1 over 2 is going to be 4 over 2, which is really just x squared, because 4 divided by 2 is 2. Here we've got the y, and 2 plus a negative 1 is just 1, so it's just y. So x squared y would be my final answer for that one. Let's try one that gets a little more complicated here. Let's look at C. So here we have 4a to the power of negative 2, b to the power of 2/3, divided by 2a squared b to the power of 1/3. So here we're dividing. Dividing means we have to subtract the exponents. We also have to divide our front numbers. So I'm going to divide the 4 by the 2 to just be left with 2, or 2 over 1 if you'd like to do that. Then I have a to the power of negative 2, but I have to subtract the 2 from underneath. So I have to subtract the 2 from down here. I have b to the power of 2/3, but again I have to subtract the 1/3 from underneath since we were dividing. So this becomes 2a to the power of negative 4, because minus 2 is minus 4. And b, 2/3 minus 1/3 is 1/3. Now the issue here is that, and we can say this is over 1, the issue is that we have a negative exponent. You're not allowed to have negative exponents in your final answer. So we're going to send that a with its exponent to the denominator. In other words, we're flipping it down to the bottom. So we'll end up with 2b to the power of 1/3 on top, and a to the power of 4 on the bottom. When you flip it, the exponent is no longer negative. So that would be our final answer. Let's try another one. Here we have 100a divided by 25, a to the power of 5, and b to the power of negative 1/2. This is a little bit tricky, but again, I'm going to this time start inside my brackets and deal with my outside power later. So let's start inside the brackets. We're going to start by breaking these kind of separately. So I'm going to go the 100 divided by 25 is kind of one piece. The a divided by a to the power of 5 is kind of another piece. And then there's no b on top. So I'm just going to put a 1. And then b to the power of negative 1/2 on the bottom. Okay. So let's start with 100 divided by 25. That's just 4. A to the power of 1 divided by a to the power of 5, we subtract the exponents. So we'll get a to the power of negative 4, because 1 minus 5 is negative 4. And then I still have that b to the power of negative 1/2 on the bottom. So So I'm going to put b to the power of negative half on the bottom. Now there's an issue here because we've got some negative exponents. So you might choose to get rid of the negative exponents right now. So I could send the a to the power of negative 4 to the bottom, and I can also send the b to the power of negative half to the top. That's because whenever it's negative, you flip it to wherever it's not, either the top or the bottom. So we're actually going to have b to the power of 1/2. Now it's a positive 1/2 when I flipped it up, and a to the power of 4 is going to be on the bottom. So again, you flip it when there's the negative, and they're both negative, so they both get flipped. But that's not the end of it for us. We have that power of half there still. So the power of half has to get multiplied or applied to each thing inside. It has to get multiplied to the power, but applied to the 4. So what I mean by that is the 4 is going to have the power of half, and then b is going to have half times half, and the a to the power of 4 is going to be times half as well. So again, each of the powers gets multiplied by half, but the 4 actually gets the half applied to it as an exponent. So 4 to the power half is the same as square rooting 4. b to the power of 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4, and a to the power of 4 times 1/2 is 4/2, which is 2. So my final answer, the square root of 4, is going to be 2. So it's going to be 2b to the power of 1/4 divided by a squared. Now, in some of these more difficult questions, there's a lot of different ways that you could do each question. Often it's easiest to start on the inside and work your way out. And whenever you see a negative exponent, it is a good idea to flip it so that you can get rid of it right away and not have to deal with any more ugly negatives. This is going to take a little bit of practice. So please try number 14 and 16, and then there's also a quiz to complete. Good luck, and let me know if you have questions.